live. Just so everyone's aware.
Yep, okay.
Okay, cloud recording is on, and I will do the YouTube live now. Alrighty, we're connecting to YouTube Live now.
Okay, I've got the stream.
Great.
Okay, so that should be displaying on the lunch page now.
Yep, I'll just check that and make sure. Great, yep, that's showing up there now. Excellent. All right, so we're up and running.
Like Frank's on there, Anne.
Yep.
Hi, Frank, you in?
Yeah, I'm here.
I can hear you.
Let me see if I can put the video on.
Yeah, why not?
See my
Yeah,
ugly
there you
face. There you go.
Hey, Frank.
Hey, Mob.
Hey, yeah.
Hey, yeah.
Alrighty, we're all up and running. Captions are assigned. I'm going to mute now.
So, Frank, we're just going to, get an update from you about what's new. We don't need to go over where we've been. People can see that.
Yeah.
And talk about things that people need to think about and how they can get into discussions or benefits or programs or whatever. So we'll keep it pretty practical, I think.
Yep. Okay. All right. There's I suppose people ask questions. I know there's a few mythologies out there already, Anne, so it's all right.
What about people taking pay cuts? It didn't sound like a myth to me when they said it, Frank.
No.
Sensible idea.
No, there's some people talking about, some people saying that did we use the moderation process to do some, how can I say it, political interference of any kind, but that's not the case. But anyway,
okay.
People ask it, I'll answer it.
Yeah.
The 30% cut stuff, I'll play a dead bat, Anne. It's not my decision to make, baby.
No.
I've already expressed my view internally, but then again, I'm leaving in the start of June, so yeah.
Yeah. So you're probably not believable to anybody anymore.
Well, they're just going, well, yeah. I know. I think I still got some last residues of credibility left, but it's getting there. I think the big one is, but I flagged this from the start internally while we're on mute. I said to people, if you're going to put a 30% cut on everyone's just going to turn their gaze to someone else.
Like who are the people who haven't got a 30% cut?
Yeah. Like, anyway.
All right. Well,
all right.
We're about to start, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Little Lunch Online. I'd like to welcome the captioners today, Marissa and Marissa and Emily, and Susan we've got from Auslan Interpreters. Susan has spent the week with the Prime Minister interpreting for him, so this will probably be a great occasion for her, I would think. Welcome to all of you, and welcome to Frank Panucci. We've asked Frank back because it's given us a bit of time to think about what's happened. Now, can I start by acknowledging that we meet on the traditional lands of our First Nations people? I'm on Kaurna land, and can I ask that everybody acknowledge the land that they're on in the chat pages, and we pay our respects to the elders past and present, and thank our First Nations people for their care of country and culture over many thousands of years. Okay, so the focus today is to bring people up to date with any new information from the Australia Council about where things are going, and for us to look at what is it that we can do, what are the ways that people can get involved, what's the information you need in order to be able to be more properly look after yourself and your art over the next few weeks at least. So I'll get Frank to start and tell us what, if anything's happened since the announcement. What is it we need to know? What is it about job keepers and job seekers that's now relevant, given that the bill's now been through the House? Anyway, Frank, bring us up to date. Frank, you haven't got you. Unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Anyway, firstly, I acknowledge that I'm on the unceded lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Fortunate enough to be born and still reside on their lands, and thank them every day for everything they continue to teach me and for their care and generosity of the lands. So I won't go through. If people have got particular specific questions about the outcomes for their own particular organisation, obviously we'll deal with them offline, one-on-one, rather than through this forum. Just quickly, we'll be doing more detailed analysis of the outcomes and sort of put that out as much as we can. The reality is, as you all know, we managed to support 95 organisations through the 4-year funding process, and then we went through an analysis and decided that the best way to try and assist organisations that currently fund through the...
Sorry, can I interrupt? I'm interpreting, but I can hear a lot of feedback and it's really hard to hear you. So I think people need to mute or something. Sorry.
Is that better? Is that better? Is there background noise? Is that the issue?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, wait a sec. I'll try and... Can I just sort of try and change rooms for a sec?
Because thanks, Susan.
I think my neighbour has decided to start cutting their grass.
Must be a metaphor of some sort, Frank.
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, just let me see if I can get to a space where it's a bit quieter. Bear with me as I walk. Is that better? Is that better for the background noise?
Yes, that is better.
Okay, thanks. All right, sorry. So, I'll just close the door. Use of home offices. Anyway, so we did the 30% reduction in the payments for 2021 for the ones that were successful with 4-year funding, and we've managed to therefore provide some funding to the current 4-year funded organisations who were unsuccessful for through 2021, and that's to try and deal with the COVID issue as well, because the reality is that the impact of COVID will be ongoing and continuing even after all the restrictions and stuff have been lifted. the question of what access there is through COVID and stuff, we've put something up on our website and we'll try and keep updating that. We're around what are the potential options through things like the JobKeeper program in particular for organisations and their capacity to both support artists that are either, or their workers in their organisations are either permanent full-time, permanent part-time and casuals. Casuals is a much more difficult area for us to get a clear handle on, and a lot of that's going to be through the interpretation of the ATO, because there's discretion in the analysis of that. Our understanding is that there will be a level of leniency, so I think people need to, in a sense, put their hand up and ask for put that case to the JobKeeper program and work out what that looks like. The other change that I think most of you are aware of is that in terms of turnover for organisations, if you are an organisation which is registered with the ACNC, the Australian Charities, whatever that acronym stands for, but if you're registered as a charity through that, your turnover has to have fallen by 15% and not 30%. So that's a change that came in after, how can I say it, after the original announcement and was put through the legislation as well. As I said last time, if people attempt to register to get funds through JobKeeper and they have difficulties with that, or they find there are certain aspects that don't seem to be working, they need to let us know, because that way we can make representations as much as we can through our own contacts to try and see how we can see if there's any case that can be made, if there's any, I suppose, how could I put this, any unforeseen, excuse me, any unforeseen sort of loopholes that no one picked up. And I assume there'll be more and more, there'll be those that come up, not just for the arts and cultural sector, but for other sectors as well. So we'll keep updating our COVID advice around that and things like that. We are still in conversation with the Minister's Office and the government around specific issues relating to the arts and cultural sector. But in particular, obviously, our focus as Australia Council is around that realm of the arts and cultural sector that we both support directly through our multi-year funding programs or through our grants programs, basically to be used, a pretty sort of shorthand term, fundamentally through the subsidised arts sector that we have direct contact with. Obviously, there's a much broader conversation around the creative sector as a whole, and those conversations are being done by industry representations as well to government, and we know that on a daily basis. I don't know if there's much more. I'd rather most probably just take questions, to be honest, Anne, unless there's anything specific that you feel you want to address.
Well, I think that what you've done is highlight the real area, which is the independent artists who are going to have enormous difficulty. And presumably the $5 million resilience fund, is an attempt to support that, which seems woefully inadequate for the number of people who are there. So I'm interested in two things. What if anything, can be done about increasing the amount in that fund? And secondly, how are you going to coordinate that fund with the $10 million that's gone into the regional arts? Presumably will also be supporting a large number of independent artists.
Okay. So the resilience program's was opened up and at the end of last week, the week before, and to date, I haven't checked the report today, but as of Thursday of last week, there were over 700 applications submitted and an equivalent number that were still in draft form. So the demand's pretty high. The 5 million, I think everyone appreciates that it's not going to, it is, in the scheme of things, not enough, but that's as much as we can scrape through through the end of this financial year from our existing budget. If there were more funds coming down the pipeline, then we could be able to put them in. But currently, that's what we can scrape from our current. It's basically out of our existing budget. And we'll see how, if there's any way of finding more funds before the end of the financial year, we'll throw them into that as well. In terms of working with Regional Arts Australia and the $10 million that was allocated, announced last week for Regional Arts Australia, we have conversations with Regional Arts Australia. Some of it will be for yes, to support individual artists. A fair bit of it will also be towards projects which, if you notice in the way that it was framed, it is actually to deal with not just the COVID impact, but drought, flood, and bushfire recovery as well. And that was a concern I think a number of us had, which was while all the COVID issue was going on, not to lose sight of the impact that a lot of those communities and artists reside in those communities have already been through with either, particularly bushfires, then floods and droughts, and how COVID then, in certain senses, a further impact on that, given that one of the original responses, in particular, the bushfire issue was, in trying to, how can I put it, augment regional tourism, because it was seen as a way of, getting those communities back on their feet and providing opportunities, then impacted now by COVID, where basically people aren't allowed to leave their houses, so therefore that wasn't going to work. And so I've already had conversations with Ross from Regional Arts Australia. We're in pretty close contact. We're not going to be too strict about sort of saying, if you've got money out of this, you can't apply to us, because it's just, our view around that is, because there's a whole range of state programs happening as well around the place, trying to do, address the immediacy of the COVID thing. And our view around that, even we had conversations with our state colleagues as well, is trying to sort of have some system in place where you try and coordinate. If people have applied here and they get money out of that, don't get it out of that, it just delays things too much. And we're more interested in turning money over as quick as we can, and we're prepared to where someone manages to get some funds out of two different sources, give them, how can I put it, where people are currently at. That may not be a bad thing either, to be honest, Dan.
Okay, that's great, Frank. That's really good news for people. That's terrific. People, if you've got a question, stick it on the chat line, or stick your hand up on the chat line so that I can let you in. So I suppose one of the things that we could think about is, what is it that we could do that might help increase the $5 million in that resilience fund, since clearly that's going to be important. Anyway, let's think about that for a bit.
Sure.
Melissa, I think you've got your hand up.
Oh, sure, I'll go first. Thanks for that update, Frank. I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate the resilience fund that came out. There's a lot of people that I know have jumped on that. We get Centrelink, and whether it's Job Seeker or Job Keeper, my feedback from people talking to me has been they all feel like they're a slightly complicated case. They don't instantly click the buttons, and when they go to get advice, there's no way to get in the line or get the type of specialist advice they might need as sole traders, ABN. So just to let you know that that's not as simple as it sounds to go to Centrelink for artists. I wanted to
sorry, Melissa, just around that. So for JobKeeper, you're not going to Centrelink. It goes to ATO fundamentally. Yeah.
They've got to go. That's right. The job, yeah. But the job. Really hard to get through to get advice to know how to apply in the first place. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, not so much the JobKeeper. Sorry.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, in the strategy of Australia Council, what advocacy is it about taking advantage of the attention there is on the arts at the moment during isolation. How many people are relying on books and music and films online and all these creative outlets? Has the Australia Council got any idea about jumping on that bandwagon and pointing to it, saying, look what we do for your life?
In our conversations that we have, with in advice we provide to government, we raise the whole issue around obviously how important the arts and the activity artists are undertaking and the innovation and ingenuity the artists and arts organisations are presenting on a daily basis to help people's isolation and make them feel better, and also raised, we raised the issue too of how quick artists were to contribute and volunteer themselves to assist through the whole trauma that was the bushfires in particular in recent times, along, through a number of states, and how the artists were there and the arts and creative community was there to assist people through that. And now that they are in particularly being impacted by what's happening, how that, is something that should be forgotten.
Yep.
How can I put it? But and we've provided some some social media channels for artists and arts organisations to put their information out there and actually disseminate it. And that's also a way for us to be able to demonstrate back into government, the breadth of the work that's actually taking place. I'm reluctant to use the word advocacy because advocacy means a very particular thing to me. And I don't think that, the Australia Council per se does advocacy as what we might consider it to be if we're out in the sector. Our principal role is advising government, so it may at times not be so publicly demonstrable what we're doing around that space, but rest assured that they are things that we keep a very close eye on and provide opportunity to and raise in our advice to government on a regular basis.
Okay, I've got questions from Daryl and Paya and Lenine. So let's, so anybody else, get yourself up on the chat line and I'll put you in the queue. Daryl.
Okay, Frank. Just from a quick back of the envelope calculation, if there's 700 so far applications in for the Resilience Fund and a similar amount in draft form, and I guess you're counting, that's already going to be 5 or 6 times the amount that's actually available in the fund. I'm sure you'll know the math without me having to point it out, but it's just the only point I'm making is anything you can do to increase what is there would be really appreciated, I think, by very many people.
Thanks, Daryl. Pia.
Hi, Frank. I'm kind of tagging on to that, Daryl. I think that the conversation I've had with, I'm an independent dancer working in Melbourne, and so because of the great distress to us, because we belong to no organisation, we feel particularly vulnerable and very, very distressed. And so something that's happened is this kind of despair that we have spent most of our lives in this severe competition. And now at the moment when we just cannot even imagine, we're being asked again to now come up with an innovative idea around being resilient, when in fact we have spent our entire careers operating at high levels of resilience. Sure. So most of the dancers I speak to are in this, and I'm sure it's across all forms, of this kind of sense of, we're exhausted. We're actually exhausted. And there has been no acknowledgement, I feel like, and I might be wrong, but acknowledging how exhausted people are and how actually, though it's the money, the $5 million, which I agree with you, Daryl, won't take care of, as is the usual case, very many people. What can we do that I don't know. I don't know. It's not really a question. It's more the point that people feel so deeply upset that the only way they can survive is to still be in competition with all of their colleagues and friends who are equally suffering. And so this is a really big question around, I guess, mental health. But just to point out that we have been resilient for a very, very, very long time. And this feels an audacious moment to ask us to be even more resilient and further to have an innovative and creative online platform to do that.
So just quickly around that, I mean, well, yeah, I have said on a regular basis, I think most people have heard me say this, the greatest subsidisers and contributors to the arts are artists. They're never compensated in any way for time, effort, commitment, passion and everything else they put in. I've never known a project that's been funded by the Australia Council where artists were actually remunerated for the work they put into it on a basis that you'll consider anywhere being a normal, even subsistence wage at times. And all I can say around that is that I think most of the people who work inside the Australia Council appreciate that on a daily basis. In terms of the Resilience Fund in particular, there are 3 different streams. The survival stream was basically, I suppose, inverted commas, emergency relief, because we know that in things like if you are able to finally get through the labyrinth of job seeker, and if JobKeeper does come in, JobKeeper will be back paid from, even though it starts in May and you're eligible, you get it in you get it back paid dated to start of April. Job seeker is less clear because it's through Social Security and Centrelink, so the arrangements around that still need to be, that's a labyrinth in its own way. The other 2 streams were opened up to try and assist some artists who had already approached us about trying to do things and how they could sort of, inverted commas, try and work their way through what is the difficulties being confronted by the COVID stuff. All that said, going back to what Daryl, is quickly worked out, is 5 million we know is an inadequate amount. We do know that some states and local governments are offering assistance packages as well, but I assume that just increases even more distress and pressure on individual practitioners, because all of a sudden you find yourself possibly having to, submit proposals to 4 different agencies just trying to eke something out. I think people need to also, at this time, looking out for each other, and the mental health of each other is a really crucial thing. And I noticed in the money that the government announced, around the package that it announced, that there were significant funds going to an agency like Support Act, which is concentrated particularly in the music sector. There are other similar things across different areas of practice. But I don't have an answer. I don't have a quick fired answer to the issues you raised, Pay. I think that,
I think I'm just wondering, like in a larger philosophical sense, is if this will catalyse an actual entire reframing of how we treat our artists, how we think about value, and how we talk to the government about why it's valuable.
I think that's a fantastic question for us, Pia, and people are responding in the chat line. Can I come back to that at the end, because I think we'll have to set up a little lunch online. The Australia Council's not actually going to help us with that topic, I don't think. I think we're going to have to reframe. And there's a couple of things that have come out that I think we need to pick up. So if you can hang on, I'll just finish with Frank and then we'll return to what we might pick up and how we might deal with it. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Great. Lenine. Not there?
On mute.
Hang on, I just had to unmute. Sorry. There's a lot going on. Hi, everybody. Thanks again for coming online, Frank. This is really great, and thanks, Anne, for facilitating. Basically, my question was sort of starting out where David went and where Pia went, and then the third part of my question was obviously with, I jumped online today and had a look at the application package, and without criteria and making internal decisions, I was wondering, it's obviously can't simply be a first in, first serve.
No. You're back on mute. You're back on mute.
Okay, I'm off mute again. I've got a little barnacle today. So basically, my question is, so when I was doing the APAM state-based conversation, there was some very mid-career practitioners and artists and some quite senior artists who were all talking about this need for time, and that they, a little bit like what kind of maybe Pia's sort of asking as well, but that the desire to feel like if you don't get in the pool now, you're going to miss out. And that a lot of artists were feeling very emotional, obviously, but a lot of performing artists were saying, like, our entire practice is based on the live experience, and it's going to take us a little bit of time with each other to have that reflection about what professional development we could even do. Some people were even talking about, a year's worth of international touring that was around kind of racy, interesting content. And now they're thinking in 12 months' time, is any of that work going to get picked up by any international venues? Because it's probably not going to be the right moment for what audiences may or may not even be interested in if venues even open again. So I guess it's a little bit of feedback, but my question is really, is there time, and can that be communicated in some of the messaging? Because I think particularly in the performing arts sector, we're feeling an urgency to put a hat in the ring for some resources, but we're also really struggling to work out, apart from running free online dance classes on Instagram, what the heck we're supposed to actually do to change our practice in this period of time. Feels like we're not as adaptive, and particularly around broader community engagement stuff. I mean, that's just taking a lot of, friggin' thinking process without us being able to work out what we can apply for.
I've got 2 minutes left, Frank, so.
Quickly, it's not first in, first dressed, best dressed. There are criteria that sit underneath it. We're doing an internal assessment so we can turn them around quick as we can. In terms of, there's a lot of flexibility in the streams that we've put up, particularly in the not the Survive one, but the other two, in terms of if it's money for reshaping and thinking about stuff, that's fine as well. It's not about a project with a definite, product at the end, or something, an outcome outside of people get together and talk through stuff. So, I mean, that's something that's it. The world will change, and I think I said this last time, I don't think there's a switch that gets turned off and turned on. Once we're through all of the restrictions and stuff and the switch gets turned back on, I'm not of the view that things will go back to the way they were just like that. I think there'll be a moment of reassessment across a whole range of things, and we're still hearing, all the indications are that it's more likely than not that international travel won't reopen per se until 2021.
Frank, I want to ask you a last question there. There's people want to know about the earlier grant round, when you're going to, February I think it was, wasn't it? When you're going to announce that February grant round?
Well, hopefully it'll be next week. I'm just going through the final assessment. The assessments got completed just before Easter on Thursday before Good Friday. We had the final assessment meeting. We're in the process of pulling all those decisions together and trying to work out what the rankings are and how the budget gets allocated. And so hopefully by next week we'll be able to get out to people. Try and do it as quick as we can.
Thanks. Now, one last question from me, really. We're obviously going to have to talk about what it is we can do to help increase that resilience fund, since that's so critical. But somebody's asked whether you've been to any of the philanthropic foundations to get them to match your fund.
We are in conversations with some philanthropic entities about possibly utilising funds. Some of them, some of those conversations are about possibly, working and supporting the Resilience Fund. Some philanthropic agencies, have particular issues they might be more interested in supporting as well. So we're in those conversations. Whether they come to fruition or not is, hopefully they do.
Okay, so some of the things we might want to do, the Australia Council might want to do, we might be supporting what you do and we can be in conversation. And actions that we take might be more uncomfortable for the Australia Council, like people need to talk to their MPs and, there needs to be a bit of public conversation about how to improve that. One of the things that would help is if you return to your previous practice of, alongside the list that you've published of who you've funded, you actually said how much money there was and where they are. Are you going to do that?
Yes, we will do that. It's just we got them up as quick as we could last when we made the announcements. Yeah.
So can we ask you to do that?
Sure.
Because as you'd understand, some kind of a campaign's going to get mounted. So that would really help to do that. There's a million other questions, but I think
I can stay on a bit longer if people want.
I think that the most sensible thing for us to do is to actually work out how to move into a conversation that we have where we get together some ideas and then we come back to you and talk to you about what those are. So I'm keen to actually move us forward. So what I might do is wind up this bit and then just do a little bit of housekeeping and then talk to people about when we might have the conversation about what action we can take to support people. Norm, Sarah, does that suit you? Yeah.
Yes, that sounds good. Thank you.
Great. All right, Frank. It's been terrific again to have you, and it is important that we are able to keep talking to you, even in just short bites, so that we don't get too far away, so that we feel as if we're all still part of one national family. So I'd really like to thank you for making yourself available.
Yeah, look, I'm more than happy, as you all know, that there's 5 million meetings going on all the time, but if I just get enough notice, I can try and make time. More than happy to keep cutting time out.
Great.
All right.
Thank you. All right, let me just tell you a couple of things. First of all, Multicultural Arts Victoria are hosting tomorrow's lunch with Eleanor Jackson as the special guest. The video from today will be up online soon. There's a lot of material here in the chat line about things we need to think about and do. So, and if we take up Pia's question, there's the big question about, is this now a time to start promoting the idea of a living wage again, and how would we do that? And then the other question is, what is it we can do that will put pressure on to increase the $5 million in the Resilience Fund? How can we get either the government or philanthropic organisation or whatever, what is it that we as a sector can do to support the increasing of that fund? So I'm going to suggest that Norm and Sarah and Elliot, that we have a conversation, and we need to program a little lunch online to actually address those two questions and say how can we, it's time for some action. We need a bit of a plan here. And then once we've got a plan, we can go back to the Australia Council, or we can say to people, now's the time to talk to your MP and here's the script. And anyway, so I'm keen to move us forward. So we might have a discussion at the end when we finish today and work out when we can actually program that. as soon as possible, and then we'll send you a notice saying we've programmed this discussion in. Can you come in and we'll have a plan. One about the living wage and how that might be forwarded, and one about what's a plan to increase the $5 million. Does anybody disagree with that? Anybody got their hand up saying, "Shut up, Anne"? No. Oh, that's good. Lucky, I'd say. Emily and Melissa, thanks for the thank you for the captioning, and Susan, thanks very much. And that's it. We're done for today, and we'll talk to you tomorrow, and we'll email you about how we're going to pick up those important topics. All done. Bye.
Bye all. Thanks.